Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. There is nothing that I like more right before I hit record than hearing my guests say that they want to be similar to Oprah. I asked my guest, Kasim, if just double checking the pronunciation of his first and last name, and he was like, you know something, I'm cool with you just announcing me as Kasim. So Kasim is an entrepreneur, founder of 5, 7, and 8 figure businesses, and his resume is extensive. I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can. But Qasim, his name rhymes with awesome, and he is awesome. He is a college dropout, entrepreneur, author, and proud front row dad. And he is an entrepreneur. He's like co-founder of Pareto Talent, which I hope I'm saying right, Driven Mastermind, 3-time Shopify Challenge, Nigo Marketing. I probably should have asked you these questions. Solutions 8. I mean, I could go on and on. He's an expert not only on entrepreneurship and founding, he's also had 2 successful exits. He talks about delegation, and I can't wait to talk to Qasim. Welcome to Mark My Words, my friend. How you doing?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks for having me.
It is my pleasure to have you here. Thank you. And I also have to give this man props for dealing with my transition to StreamYard. That Zoom outage a few weeks ago has totally thrown me off. I'm usually so diligent with everything. So I have to get that sorted out. Not that that really affects anything here as long as we show up and we talk. So let me jump into this as I always do. And I always like going back in the Wayback Machine. And for one thing, the first thing that sticks out to me, especially on LinkedIn here, is University of New Mexico dropping out for dummies with honors. I love your perspective and the way you put everything, especially right before we hit record. Uh, just tell me a little bit about growing up and what kind of things you might have wanted to do and what your expectations were going into maybe college and just that whole time period.
I wanted to be an actor, actor and filmmaker. I have the maybe now stereotypical personality that craves attention. So I like being in front of the camera. I like being on stage. And I made as honest a go of it as I think I could have made given the resources that I had. I gave it a real shot. Did not work out for me, as evidenced by the fact that I'm now running around, schlepping professional services. But it taught me a lot. There's that business is interesting, and I mean, gosh, you want to talk about just trial by fire? Um, you learn things that translate to entrepreneurship perfectly. And I don't even mean the performance end of things. Like, you'd never have to be in front of the camera, but if you're in any facet of the production process, what's really interesting is you're constantly hunting your next gig. And it doesn't matter how many you have lined up, there's this feeling of perpetual starvation where even if you could be booked out for the next year, which never happened to me, but even hypothetically speaking, you still feel like you're climbing this muddy hill and there's never going to be enough, and you're one roll away from obsolescence. And while it sounds distinctly negative, that was such a great forum to learn in. you know, because entrepreneurship's the same way in a lot of ways, or at least it starts that way, and you can solve for it, but you have to learn to do that. And so that whole realm of my life, I think, really fed me in a way that was very positive.
I've been working in the entertainment business for 20 years, so I've been working in television, not in front of the camera, but just behind, and rather, these days, I'm rather far behind the camera, behind the scenes, but I I mean, I can't sit here and claim that I've had the life that you've had as a starving actor, and you're trying to get that big gig and you're just gigging around in general. But I spent a lot of years freelancing in my field, and it's not easy. The
Mm-mm.
entertainment business, no matter how good you might be, it's not an easy business to be in. And you have no idea the challenges and just how hard it is just to get a job, just for me to have the job that I have now, which is an amazing job. But it took me a lot of work, took a lot of interviews, getting turned away. And I think, much like you probably think in your mind, you're like, I'm a really talented guy and I have a lot to offer. And it's like the same thing for me. It's like I know I have a ton to offer and I know I'm good enough. And it's like you're getting turned down and passed away. And I can't relate quite on the level that I think that you were at with it, but I can kind of relate. It's kind of similar, a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, I think what you're describing sounds like the exact same thing. You know, it's gigging, and in an environment where there's way more supply than there's demand. You know,
Yes.
like it just doesn't matter what the role is or what the project is. There's so many people and so many people willing to do it for free. So if you're trying to make a living at it, you know, it's this whole other layer of complexity. So yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. I enjoyed it. It's, you know, I mean, um gosh, I met my ex-wife on at an acting studio. She and I spent our, you know, most of our early courtship on set with each other making movies. My kids were sort of they're byproducts of that whole world. So I've got a lot to be grateful for just as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, everything happens for a reason. And I know that looking back over the past 20 years and connecting all the dots, I can see how everything I experienced and did because of being in this field where, as you put it, there's a whole lot more supply than demand. And, yeah, it's not easy. So, to your point, like this podcast is something that I created because, I wanted to create my own luck and my own. I don't know if luck is the right word, but I wanted to create my own life and success. And I guess a little bit of it is luck. I mean, luck plays into a lot of things, but yeah, that I didn't think that I guess I should probably ask you before I talk about myself again. When did you know that you had it in you to perform and you just had that bug? Because I had a similar kind of bug where I always wanted to put myself out there, but I never thought that anybody would want to like hear my voice or watch me. I was born with like cleft palate and lip. So that's how I wound up more behind the scenes because I had it in me. I even took an acting class in college, which I
Okay.
don't even know how I got an A. I'm a terrible actor, but I I just wanted that. I knew it was in me, but that imposter syndrome, those limiting beliefs were in my mind, and I it took a lot of meaning supportive people for me to maybe see my own potential. So I'm curious to know, just did you have like an experience where people were supporting you, or was it just something you needed to do?
I think I always liked making people laugh. Like that was it was an easy button to press. I was always the new kid. We moved quite a bit. Um, and so it was like that seemed to be the catalyst is and it's not just laugh. I really wanted to be seen as somebody who um was worthy of attention, I guess. It goes back to that kind of attention seeking behavior. It's like I really wanted the limelight. I really wanted to have people's attention. And then there's like the school play happens, or there's the talent show or the presentation you're supposed to give, and you start to get little tastes of it, and you're like, oh, that you mean I can have this at scale? You know what I mean? You mean instead of just 10 people there could be hundreds? Like that's amazing. And so um it's interesting because as we're diving deeper, it doesn't feel like it was birthed from a healthy place. And to be honest, I don't think the pursuit was entirely healthy, which I probably need to be grateful that it didn't work out because uh, I don't know that I would have handled it very well. I mean, there are people that can achieve things like that, and they transition well because they have, solid foundation and good folks around them. And I didn't. I don't know that that would have been me. I think I'd have been, uh, maybe one of the more cautionary tales.
Not to compare podcasting and being on TikTok to what you were pursuing, but as I grow my followings and as the show grows, like I just got myself into a podcasting network and it's growing more and more and more. And I think about those things where it's like, okay, can I actually handle? Because I'm getting some attention that I'm not like used to. So it's like I ask myself those questions. I'm like, can I handle that if I get more and more
Mm.
attention? And I feel like if you're putting yourself out there, those are very good questions. Like I think it's good that you kind of ran that back in reflection and was like, something probably, it all works out for a reason.
Yeah, I believe that really strongly. Um, the attention piece is always, even now, like I have a YouTube channel and I'm pretty diligent with it. And at the moment, probably because most of the subscribers are people that have followed me for a while, I'd say that the comment ratio, positive to negative, is 9-1. I'll get 9 positive comments for every 1 negative comment I get. And yet, even so, that's the case. The negative comments eat me alive. Like especially when they're right, when they're, like the people that say things that are just silly or ignorant, I can get over those pretty easily. But when somebody points out something that I know is true, that's when I'm like, oh gosh. And I have the hardest time um, bringing myself back from that. I was actually at a speaking engagement recently, and I said something hyperbolic that I knew was hyperbole, and I actually thought the audience knew was hyperbole. And a member of the audience shouted back, he goes, bullshit. And I was like, I didn't want to back down from the challenge. And he's put me on the spot, and it was a small room, it was less than 100 people there. It was very intimate. And I was like, tell me what you mean. I more or less gave him the floor. And it was so uncomfortable because he had the high ground. Because he, like I had exaggerated a point. He caught me at a weak point. And then for the entire rest of the talk, I just went so deep inside myself. It was really hard for me to feel like I was providing any level of value because I felt like such a charlatan, and it was just this really good reminder that if you're going to seek attention and you're going to put yourself out there and you're going to step on stage or shoot videos or make TikToks or whatever it is, um, everybody now has the opportunity and maybe even the right to critique you. That's more or less what you're asking for. Now, we ask for it hoping that the criticism or the constructive criticism is, positive, or the feedback is positive, I guess, if criticism can't be positive. And when it's negative, if we're not able to alchemize that, then we're just not accepting both sides of the coin. So, dude, I've been at this for 20 some odd years, and I'm still learning that lesson over and over again.
I love hearing your story about speaking because that's something that I'm hoping to do maybe beyond podcasting or going live on TikTok someday. And I'll tell you, right before we connected for this session, there was literally somebody on TikTok live, and this will happen where, because my beard maybe not at a distance, may look pretty filled in, but the filtering part is not filled in. I will have people. I just had a person just they try to like get you rattled, and the
Mm,
thing they don't know about me is that I've heard it all. I've been through everything. So I'm just like, all right, dude, like I already know that. What's your point? But they were literally a comment right before you came on. They were like, bro, what's going on with your beard? I'm just like, really? Like, like I don't know. And they're trying to get people rattled and scared off. Like they want to cause a fuss. And you almost, and I think if I were in your shoes, I would have had hopefully a similar reaction. It's like you have to know going in, like even if people are coming to my pages and saying like, you know, Mark, you're a terrible host or whatever. I'm like, well, I can't be mad at them. I'm putting myself out there. And that's the kind of thing that I think if you are to put yourself out there, there's a lot of really amazing things and rewards that come from it. But there are some downsides, and you gotta be prepared and have some thick skin.
yeah, yeah, that's really well said. It's, they're equal measures, right? Equal measures positivity, and then, whatever comes along with that, the negativity kind of tends to match it. Which is a good lesson to learn in life. Like the better life gets, the more successful I get, the bigger my problems. Like I've got problems now that I look if you had given me this problem 10 years ago, I'd have been like, done. And now it's just this thing that I have to deal with. It's like, oh, we're just preparing for the deposition or whatever, and you're like, oh, yeah, it's so interesting the way that you just evolve. I forgot. I think it's Jordan Peterson who says this often. He says that problems don't get easier, you get stronger. And
I
so it's
agree with that.
what you're going through and what you've been through. It's not that that gets any easier. Those comments don't get any easier, right? But Mark gets stronger and more adept and more confident and more able. And I think that's really important too. If you don't mind, hopefully this isn't too personal. Have you found, or did you find, especially when you were a kid, were there thought leaders or people who were visible that had cleft palates? Was there anybody that you looked to as like an example or somebody that you could look up to?
Nobody, and I'm so glad you asked that because so what I have was a part of like a bigger syndrome that I inherited. My so it's like kind of complicated, but me and my brother were a little more affected, whereas my sister still certainly affected, but she didn't have like the cleft and all that. But my brother was the only one that I even knew. And that was always something that I don't know if it bothered me, but it definitely made me wonder because fitting in and finding my place was always like really difficult growing up. And even in adulthood, I still struggle with it, whether it's real or it's just imposter syndrome. It's things that I'm just used to and I have to work through. But I had a guest on this show very early on in the run of this show who also had a cleft lip. And they're the only person that I've ever met. And even that was virtual that I've ever talked to. So, long story short, the answer to your question is no.
Well, and I think that's really powerful. I think there's something to be said, and I don't want to go work warrior because, there's a lot about that narrative that I think can be caustic. And there's something to be said for representation. You know, like what you're doing now by being brave and putting yourself out there and weathering that storm, in as much as it is a storm, right? Because like you said, there's positives, but like the douchebag that a moment ago offered you that comment, what's cool in my mind about it is that example that you didn't have, you now are. And maybe there's some kid out there that sees you and he's like, oh, that's so helpful for me to see, and the way he handled that was so great, and you know what grace, or you know, like he just let it roll off his back, it didn't bother him, and I can model that behavior, regardless of what their situation is, right? Like, because things can, we can draw analogies too. I think things can be really dynamic just in terms of our ability to connect with empathy. So
and and that's exactly why I approach it the way I do. That, and I really do think it's the right way and the right thing to do. But no, not. I really want to talk to you about your journey a little bit, but the whole reason that, like, basically where I'm at with TikTok was a total accident. And I created an account that wasn't related to the show. I did another one related to the show, and it did terribly because I was trying to do that account like all other social media. But
yeah,
I created a new one and tried to just do it the way that you're quote unquote supposed to. And all of a sudden, I started to have more success. I started meeting people, going to lives, and I was like, oh man, I want to go live. I want to do all this stuff. And it's just kind of turned into what it is now. It was a total accident. And then I saw how some of the more troll like people and spam people were acting. I mean, there's a lot. I've met some awesome, wonderful people, and they've all become real good friends of mine real fast. But there are a lot of people jumping in there who it's almost like a video game, where they're trying to bring you down and they're trying to rattle you, they're trying to throw you off, and you just gotta ignore it and let it roll. And I think it's a good, not only is it hopefully a good lesson for others, but it's a good lesson for me too.
yeah. Yeah, I think the personality of the network to TikTok is younger. You know,
Yeah.
viewers young, and there are people that just haven't really. It's so funny. You could take the same human and put them on two different networks, and they act differently. And we've seen that with behavioral data. I had $100 million in ad spend under management at one point, and over and over again, it was a constantly reinforced narrative that the context was as important as the person. You know, the right person in the wrong context was still wrong, and the wrong person in the right context could actually be flipped, interestingly. So that's cool, man. What's your TikTok handle? I'll go track you down.
It is Mark on Music 6, I believe. I don't even know my own name. Uh, it's just Mark. So you can find me at Mark on Music 6, and the actual name you see is Mark on Music, because as you can see, I have this vinyl collection, and I've been obsessed with music since I can remember. I remember my parents had the Magic of ABBA 8 track way back. That's, I'm telling my age a little bit on that one, but I'm under 50, but I'm not too far under 50. And yeah, they were jamming out to the Magic of ABBA in the early 80s. And that's really what got me started on just being obsessed with music. And I just figured it'd be like a more TikTok way to get, like, I guess, engrossed in the community. I didn't think it would really work out, but it did, and I'm just going with it. I'm having a real good time, and yeah. So, long story short, that's how you can find me. And speaking of flipping things around, I want to flip this in your direction a little bit more and talk about the point when you decided to transition from your acting career to entrepreneurship. Tell that story a little bit.
Yeah, it was actually pretty natural. I needed a way to feed myself while I was on set, And so I backed into the possibilities. I knew I had to do something that I could do from anywhere. So remote work was the key, and that was before that was really a buzz term. This is 22 years now, showing my age. And so I started to just throw spaghetti at the wall. I tried medical and legal transcription, and that didn't work. It was horrible. I tried outsourcing, whatever that means. And my father's from Pakistan, and so I had a cousin who claimed he could do things, which turned out to be less than honest. But it led me to meeting some people that I'd send work to. So I'd get somebody who needed a website built or a logo created or a brochure designed, and I'd charge them X, and I'd back into whatever I was being billed, and it was horrible. I was horrible at everything. I spent years telling people I was a web designer. I don't think, Mark, in all those years, I had, more than a dozen websites that actually went live and were successful. I was so bad. And I underbid everything, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't care, is the truth. I was just trying to be an actor, and I just needed a way to make a living. So somebody would say, I need this done. I'm like, oh, no problem. And then I'd send it to those people, and those people would screw it up. And then this guy would be mad at me. And out of necessity, I started to kind of focus a little bit more on the business, and it started to grow, which is what happens, right? And as the business started to grow, I started to get a little older. And the thing about acting, and this is, I have some friends that have, I'll use air quotes when I said made it further than I did, starring characters on major network television. It's about as high as my circle has gone. And the thing that's really interesting is it's not making it that stops you. It's seeing that even when you make it, a lot of what you're frustrated with doesn't go away. So I started to just kind of look around, and I'm like, man, if this isn't what I want to do, and it became really obvious really quickly that we had to move to LA, and that was the linchpin moment for me. I didn't want to go to LA. There's a bunch of things I hate about LA. No offense to anybody from LA. So I went all in. I went all in on entrepreneurship, and I failed miserably for a long time. But it was always a failing forward. That's the fun thing about entrepreneurship. I think it's Mark Cuban that says this. I might have the attribution wrong, but the quote's right. Somebody smart says, entrepreneurship's the only gamble where you can manage your downside risk and your upside risk is almost limitless. And when you look at it that way, dude, I mean, I've had more failing businesses than I've had successful businesses, probably by 5x, because I've tried everything, but I've had a couple hits, and I get music's the same way too. Most musicians, most of what they produce doesn't hit, but you get one or two hits, and that's all you really need. And so I've had a couple hits, and that's put me on the map in certain ways and in certain circles. And now here I am, full-time entrepreneur, let's say.
So what was the thing that made you want to keep trying when you had the misses?
Money. I was raised by a blind single mother living on Social Security in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So me and my little brother are welfare babies from Albuquerque. And I always knew, using air quotes again, I knew money was going to make me happy. So money and attention, right? So just chased money. And the cliched thing happened, which is you get the money and it doesn't make you happier. I will say it made me healthier. I don't, especially for young entrepreneurs who may be listening, I feel like we shame people who pursue money. And I don't think we should do that, because what they're really pursuing, generally speaking, isn't money. They're pursuing security or safety. That's what I was after. I'm a decamillionaire. I drive a 40-year-old Honda. So I'm not here to, I don't have pictures of my Lambo or beach house, because I don't have those things. I wanted to feel safe, be safe, never have to work again. And I'm really very grateful that I landed in that spot. But that's what it was. I mean, I didn't have a grand purpose to fulfill on. I wasn't trying to change the world or invent a longer lasting light bulb. I just wanted to get rich. And for the first half, I have a 20-year entrepreneurial career. For the first half of my entrepreneurial career, I was trying to do it the fast way, take the shortcut, and it always blew up in my face. It didn't just fail; it blew up. And so for the second half, I finally just got fatigued, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do the hard way. And it turns out the hard way is the easiest way. The hard way is like, it's actually once you get it going, man, it's super predictable. And I've done it 6 times now. So, kind of cracked the code there, I think, in terms of the framework.
How would you define the hard way? Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, there are no shortcuts. The economy is worth studying. If you want to be an entrepreneur, go read, the classics, and read Adam Smith, of course, but also go read Zihan and Dalio and Friedman and whoever else I'm missing. Here's what you'll learn. One, nobody knows what the hell's going on. And most of what confuses us is either semantics or nomenclature. They just use fancy ass words to make you think that you're on the out and they're on the in. Two, the economic system we're in is actually really intelligent. Like, this model is really smart the way that it works. And it's full of the smartest people in the whole world. And they're probably, and I'm talking about myself too, they're probably smarter than you. And they probably have more money than you. And they probably have more resources than you, and they know more people than you. And so if you're going to wake up and think, I'm going to outsmart these guys, I'm going to outsmart this system, I'm going to figure out something that somebody else hasn't figured out. There are people that have done it, and we love those stories, right? There's the 0 to 1, to quote Peter Thiel, and those people I know exist. I wasn't one of them. I think you got to have a 160 IQ, and you probably have to have a trust fund, and you probably have to have gone to an Ivy League school, or at least have that network. And that just wasn't my context. And so, speaking of context, when you make money the hard way, you don't reinvent the wheel. Go slug it out. Go, the best, if you don't know what to do right now and you want to be an entrepreneur, the best place to start, and I swear to God, I'm not exaggerating, I'm not being hyperbolic, I'm not trying to be dramatic. Go to Home Depot, get a bucket, a squeegee, and some soap, and then just drive around trying to wash windows. And I'll tell you why I think this is a great place to start. Because number one, I have yet to drive past a commercial building, office space, retail, or otherwise, that doesn't have dirty windows. So you already have demand. Like, you already know it's there. Now the question, and that people want clean windows. They want a clean facade. The question now just becomes, how much is it really worth to them? But it doesn't matter that the endeavor isn't scalable, isn't profitable, isn't, insert your whatever negative feedback you have on this here. It's going to teach you everything you need to know about business. It's going to teach you things like customer acquisition, outreach, marketing, pricing, sales, follow-up, CRM, communication, invoicing, bookkeeping. So do you want to be a window washer? No, I don't care. Because guess what? Your first business statistically is going to fail. So just go pick one that you can be integrous about offering. That's what I did really wrong, is I was telling people I could do stuff I couldn't do. Yeah, I could build your website. I had no idea to build a website. I'm lying through my teeth, and there's something about that that's, I'll be kind to myself now because I know I was a young man, but there's something about that that's deeply wrong. Go pick something you can do, something small, something basic, because fulfillment is not entrepreneurship. It's so important that people wrap their head around that. Fulfillment is not entrepreneurship. So take the fulfillment off of the table. Stop trying to come up with the next big idea or the next big invention. They don't matter. Even if you have, dude, I've had so many ideas that, oh gosh, nobody's done this yet. And I've poured my heart and soul into building them. And that's it's not the idea that makes a successful business. And so go get a bucket and a squeegee and go start washing windows. And there's something called the corridor principle, which is one of the most important entrepreneurial lessons I've ever learned in my entire life. And the corridor principle says that you will never see the real opportunity until you're already inside the corridor. The tragedy of that is the real opportunity is never where you chose to enter the corridor. So Henry Ford worked at a sausage factory. I didn't know this, by the way. I was taught this. Henry Ford worked at a sausage factory. I bet you Henry Ford probably wasn't too happy about it. Like, it's not something he wrote home to mom about. Look at me, mom, working at a sausage factory. And the man goes on to revolutionize the way that we produce not just automobiles, but everything. And he learned that at the sausage factory. So when you're, if you're washing your windows, you're running around, you're knocking on doors, you're calling people, you're getting these jobs, and over time you realize, like, gosh, the way that people have their reception desk set up is flawed. Every time I walk into one of these buildings, the receptionist is at a disadvantage because of this thing, or isn't able to get to me, or half of them don't have receptionists, or half of them aren't answering their phone properly. You know what? The real opportunity here is an answering service. It's not washing windows. It's answering the phone for people, or building a little kiosk where I could be a virtual receptionist. And now, bam, there it is. Great idea from the quarter principal. And if you look at all of the entrepreneurial greats, none of them woke up with an idea, executed on it, and made $1 billion. All of them were already in the corridor. We're already trying to do something else that was stupid or didn't work. And then inspiration struck. I talked a lot there, Mark, but
That's
that
okay.
how was that for an answer?
No, that everything you said was amazing and I think spot on. Even in like, so not only entrepreneurship, but I think in a lot of just businesses in general, especially like the entertainment business, as you were talking, there's a lot of people who started off doing very like menial, trivial jobs that most people don't want to do, and they somehow work their way into greatness or, success. And sometimes that's what you got to do. That's where some of the learning uh, comes into play. And there aren't a lot of people, unless you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you have more money than you know what to do with. And even then, sometimes you're not guaranteed to be successful, but
Mm.
you really have to have like a certain kind of life and resources to roll out of bed and magically have success. But I think to some of your point and some of the thing that I feel you try to emphasize is that you still need to delegate and you still need a team because ultimately, like I know for me, now I'm kind of blessed personally that I went to college for like television production and all that stuff. So I've been at least around like creative stuff and, just the more technical aspects of it at least. So I at least will try my hand at something. But even I know that eventually I'm going to have to and should delegate a little bit because one person can't do it all.
Yeah, not only that, but you almost, if one person could do it all, you wouldn't want them, because the odds of them doing all of it well,
Yeah.
uh, that's the thing that's frustrating now. I own a staffing agency out of Latin America. We find top tier talent out of Bogota, Colombia, and Buenos Aires, Argentina. Um, and I have people that come to me like, all right, well, I need somebody who knows social media management, bookkeeping, cold calling, email and inbox management. And I'm like, what person in your life have you encountered that can do all those things exceptionally well? And that's not to say that you can't have diverse talent. That's just to say that I think the way that entrepreneurs approach building a team tends to be a little myopic in scope. What they want is to get the most for the least. They're like, I want to spend the least amount of money and I want to get somebody who's just going to do all this stuff. And we've been taught to do that. We've been taught to, shop for people, let's say, as though we're shopping for a commodity. And the reason that makes sense in our minds is because commodities are interchangeable. So like if you have a CPA and I have a CPA and we swap, if those two things were commodities, like beans are a commodity, corn's a commodity, oil's a commodity. If we had a can of beans, if I had a can of beans and you have a can of beans and we swap, we're no better or worse off than we were moments before. If you and I swapped CPAs, I don't know about you, dude, but my whole life would fall apart. And it doesn't matter how good your CPA is. As a matter of fact, your CPA could be better than my CPA. And yet, the person is not a commodity. And so what I tell everybody is if you really want to grow a team and if you want to grow through people, stop looking for people that are manageable, let's say. They can just do what you send them, because manageable people need to be managed. Instead, start looking for miracles, because every human being is a miracle, and I really believe that. I believe that in on a literal sense. Even I believe in God. Let's say I didn't. Even if you're an atheist, you'd have to agree that the ultra smart chimp running around self-propagating and like launching rockets off of the earth is a freaking miracle. And the number of people that went into just you being here, just surviving, like, we're all adjusted from margin of error, a statistical impossibility. And so if you really accept that paradigm and then you move forward with it, every human you encounter is capable of something truly extraordinary. And they're yours to hire in the employment forum. You know what I mean? You have all these people that are available to you and accessible to you. And instead of trying to say, like, I want somebody who can just do everything well enough, that's one way to grow a business, but it's not a great way. What I do and what I've done historically is, who's the best? Like, I'm trying to crack the code on AEO right now, answer engine optimization. And I'm like, who's the absolute best in the world here? If I have a problem with, you name it, schema markup or Ruby on Rails, it's like, who's the best? My friend Michael Cottom, best SEO in the whole wide world. And I only know that because I Googled who's the best SEO in the world. And he was very first result. And I figured, you're my dude. When I started, I built the number one ranked Google Ads agency in the world. And I did it by finding the best Google Ads agency. And I just outsourced to them. And then I ended up finding the best Google Ads mind. His name was John Moran. And I hired him. Find the best. And when you pay for the best, what's really interesting is the economics work in your favor. That's why we named the agency the Pareto Talent, because it's the Pareto distribution. What's fun about it is, to get truly top tier talent, like absolute badass assassins, you have to pay 10% more than the high watermark. Now, that's not 10% more. That's 10% more than high watermark. So let's say that, just to use round numbers and easy math, because I'm a college dropout, let's say that the range for a salary is, $75,000 to $100,000. Well, I'm not asking you to pay 10% more than 75,000, which is where entrepreneurs think about. They're like, oh, the range is 75 to 100. That's a $75,000 role. I want you to pay 110, which is almost double, right? It's approaching double. However, when you do that, if you're willing to do that, let's say that you did pay double. Let's say you paid 150. You don't get 10 or 20 or 30 or 40% more out of that person. You get 10 times or 100 times or 1,000 times. And I've seen this in real life. John Moran, when we sold Solutions 8, managed 40% of my revenue. One employee, I was approaching 100 employees. One guy managed 40% of my revenue, and I made an 8-figure exit off the back of one dude. That's the Pareto distribution. You think I paid him well? You bet your britches. When we made that exit, John became a millionaire. He was a party to this. I had to slap golden handcuffs on him and give him equity. And I think that's the thing that entrepreneurs really miss, is stop being cheap with talent. Go get the best in the world. Hold them to high standards. I put up with nothing, dude, like nothing. No bullshit. If somebody makes a mistake, you made a mistake. We're all human. God bless. But if I start dealing with some of that kind of, the tried and true, like, oh, sorry, boss dog ate the homework, slept in on Friday, not going to make it Monday type of thing, I'm not here to manage you. I actually don't hire people that need to be managed.
I think you're making like such a brilliant point, because there's so many people out there who are freelancing their skills, and and there's nothing wrong with that. You have to start somewhere, but there have been opportunities for me to, for example, join a podcast network, and I turned those opportunities down because it didn't feel right. It just, what the people running those networks, it just, I think what they were trying to do is awesome. Anytime that you're trying to build something and put yourself out there, it's awesome. But it just wasn't the right vibe for me. I waited 5 years of the life of this show. I finally found a really amazing network that I'm now a part of, and it just feels right. Is up to my standard, and the quality is there, especially compared to the others. Again, not a knock on them, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to do our best and working hard, hopefully working hard at least. And I feel like you just gotta strive. I totally agree with you with striving for the best quality. Hold yourself to the standard that you want to be held to, and hold everybody else to that same standard, which is hopefully high.
Yeah, hopefully high. I'm with you.
So yeah, I mean, at this point, one thing that I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about is, and you alluded to it a little bit. You talked a bit about just having a couple of exits, and just the idea of being a co-founder. For me, I have never really considered having like a co-host or anything like that. If there's any business partner in what I'm trying to do or achieve, it's my wife, who I hardly ever see. She's barely involved. She's involved when she's in the mood to be involved, which is hardly ever. So I'm basically running the whole ship. And I'd be curious to get your perspective on not only co founding and working with somebody on that level, but just you alluded to it a little bit anyway with the exits. Anything else you can add about making that exit and moving on to the next thing that you can add would be interesting.
Yeah, well, I'll do my best to respond to the first question. Um, every business, I have a Facebook post about this that just went live. Every business that I've had that's been successful has had a partner. I've had a lot of failures that I went at with myself, and so if you look at that, it's humbling, because I'm like, man, every time I've tried to do this by myself, I've not made it, or I've not made it very far. And every time I've brought somebody in, the results have always been, something akin to 1 + 1 = 3. And so I think for anybody listening that wants to get started, or is struggling, I think partnership is the path. There's a couple of notes though. Assume your partnership is going to end. It's not if, it's when. It's not a marriage. People are like, oh, business partnerships like marriage. No, they're not. This has a fuse, and the fuse is burning, and this will end at some point. And start your partnership with that understanding, and then operate in your partnership with that understanding. And to be honest with you, if I did that, 50% of my partnerships probably would have manifested better. And I've ended on really good terms with just about everybody I've ever been in business with. I can think of one person who things went south, and yet we're still on speaking terms. So they didn't go that bad. And I wish I would have approached it differently. So that's the mistake I see people make when they choose their partner, or when they get into partnerships. The other thing I'll say is solve for redundancy. You don't need somebody like you. If you're like really good at baking pies, don't go find somebody else who's really good at baking pies and open a bakery. Go find somebody who's really good at cleaning tables and serving customers. You know what I mean? And that's actually, as silly as that example is, that should be the partnership distribution. Every partnership I've been involved in has had one of two roles. I've had one of two roles. You're either traffic or you're fulfillment. And that's it. You're either the one bringing the customer, or you're the one doing the job. And so if you're really good at doing the job, go find somebody who can bring the customer. And if you're really good at getting the customer, go find somebody who's really good at doing the job.
Well, you're making a really good point. I can't help but to think about my wife and I in this, because, like I said, she's very far, like, I don't know, Norway or Sweden or Iceland removed from what I'm doing. But what she has, when the times present themselves, and hopefully when the time will come as I get further along, she has the business skills. She's very good with just her business skills. Unlike creative, she's business, and that's how we make this work. Even though I realize that she's not a very big part of it. But I bounce a lot of things off of it with her. So whether she thinks so or not, she is a part of this. I think she thinks she's not, but she is. But
Yeah.
even for somebody like me who is doing a ton of the legwork, it's like I still could not completely do all of this without her, because without her skill set with the business side and just how to maneuver, I think I would definitely be a little more off track.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it sounds like you're lucky to have her. What does she do for a living? Do you mind me asking?
She works for a very well-known retail company. I'm gonna probably just not mention it. I can tell you when we're done, but
Yeah. Well,
she
the
like
reason I'm asking is I think that whatever her skill set is, it sounds like even though she's not necessarily in the business, she's taking what she's learning at work and then bringing it towards whatever entrepreneurial endeavors you have. And I really like having that, by the way. My brother married a woman who was she was an executive at Amazon, and he's an entrepreneur. And I remember thinking, I'm like, I wonder how this is going to go, because you have like she's used to crazy ivory tower corporate, approach to business, and my brother, he's a very successful entrepreneur, but it's still, him and a dozen employees. And she's been amazingly potent in his business because she takes everything from the corporate world and then she like injects it into this little business that never would have had that infrastructure oversight or processes or any of those things. And so again, if you're listening to this and you have what Mark has or you have what my brother has, I think there's a lot of value to that. And I, if my advice is worth anything or worth what you're paying, I'd say listen, because it's so easy for us to be dismissive. It's like, oh, you work a corporate job. What could you know? You're not an entrepreneur. And it's like, well, at one point, that organization they were working for was a small business, and it sure did grow up pretty big. So maybe there's something there that they have that you could take away.
I am guilty of being open-minded and listening to everybody. So that can be a very good thing, but it can also be a very bad thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So I am actually going to listen to myself. I told you we were going to get out of here by the top of the hour, and I actually read some of your Podmatch reviews. One of them said that the time flew by and that, paraphrasing, that they felt like they didn't even get started. And I almost feel the same way in this episode. I feel like we barely even got started. There's so much more we could talk about, but I want to spare you and the listener by not doing like a 2-hour episode. And I'm going to give you the floor to tell everybody how they can find you, work with you, and anything else you want to add.
Yeah, just go to kasim.me, KASIM.me, and there's all my short links and all my socials.
Awesome. Hey, fair enough. I'm used to that explanation being a little bit longer. You kept it short and sweet, much like your stage name. Kasim, you are awesome. I appreciate you for taking time out, for switching from Zoom to StreamYard, which is hopefully my new home. And thank you for being on Mark My Words. This was amazing.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you, Mark.
All right, folks. This again was Kasim. He is an entrepreneur and he's the founder of 5, 7, 8-figure businesses, including Pareto Talent, which I said Pareto at the beginning of this episode. So thank you for being gracious and for showing me the correct pronunciation. I'm like a grammar snob. Everybody spells my name Mark, and because of that, I'm very like particular about all that kind of stuff. If you listen to enough episodes, you'll catch on that I'm very particular. Anyway, enough about that. Kasim, thank you so much. You were amazing. And I'm Mark Schmidt. This was Mark My Words. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all soon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the Crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.